And we're on. Are we on now? I think we're on. So, so now I'm just curious. If I go here, will I see? I'm live. Is this happening? Let's see. Is there a delay? I hope nobody's watching it. This will begin at noon. It's 11:20. I want to make sure that we're operating. Yes, I think we got it. Ah, we got it. Okay. Now I just need to get ready for Minion. Okay. Going on? Is there a delay? Is there a delay? 1 2 1 2 1 2. Is there a delay? Is there a delay? Is there a delay? Is there a delay? 1 2 1 2 1 2. Is there a delay? Yes. Shavuos, for Shavuos for 2024. Yes, yes, Shavuos. Yes, Shavuos, for Shavuos for 2024. Yes, yes, Shavuos. Yes, 2024. Yes, Shavuos. Y N A G. Uh,
Well, I can talk for that matter. Can you hear me? 1 2 1 2 1 2. Aleph Gimel Daled. Hey, above sign. Tet Yud. Duh. A little slow with this. 1 2 1 2. Aleph Gimel. I think I need to open the door. People are here.
I got it into the middle because it used to just stand by stand. So I had no idea where else to keep it.
But it was all, I think, we got it, believe me, I understand that. So, the other day, I had community fuel, and I got dressed, you got some pot out, and I was half walk. Around the shore, reached up there, I had it, young, and I had a jacket in the pot, I was, and I normally match the young because it's hot, because coaching is very important. So, I mean, I had a spare bright for you, because I always need a spare, because you always need a bright, like bright colors. So, but it was a very good deal.
Rob, I just let you know, I did find a hat. Yeah, in one of the chairs.
Oh, okay, good. So we can make an announcement about that, and we can try to get the message out to people that something's been found. And it looks like we have a couple more people walking in the door. Yes, sir. No, we can wear a tallis at any point in time during daylight hours. And traditionally, there is the morning service, which is anytime between dawn and about 10 a.m. It's supposed to be the first third of the day. The afternoon service is anytime like, post lunch, 1-ish, 2-ish, until a little bit before sundown. It's considered the middle third of the day. And then the last third of the day is nightfall. The morning service, whether you are by yourself or in a minyan, any person wears a tallis, including somebody who's leading. The afternoon service, traditionally, the leader wears the tallis. Evening service, we don't wear tallis. Ask me why. I'm really glad you asked that. So the main prayer in the evening service is the Shema. And as you know, the Shema has 3 paragraphs, one of which describes these fringes on the corner of your garments. That same paragraph has the phrase, and you shall see the tzitzit, see them. Well, at nighttime also. So we wear the talit morning and afternoon, but not evening. And we'll leave it at that. A bit of studying. And in the Siddur, we turn to page 418. Page 418. In the Siddur, yes, page 4. And we say Chag Sameach, we say Good Yom Tov. This is a holiday. When we say the word Chag, we're referring to 3 main holidays in the Torah that are called Chag, Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot. So we say Chag Sameach, happy holiday. Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur could be called a Chag, but they're not really. They're in a special category unto themselves, the high holidays. Shabbat is Shabbos and not a Chag, but this is a biblical holiday. And in that regard, Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkot, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Shabbat stand head and shoulders above everything else in Jewish life. Today, we'll begin with a little study. We'll be jumping a bit, but we're turning to page 418, which is the Megillah of Ruth. 418 in the Siddur, in the prayer book, in the Siddur. It's conveniently packaged right here, page 418. When we talk about the Bible, we know that there are 5 books of the Torah. I mentioned the other day, but it bears repeating. In the very ancient tradition, it appears that the book of Psalms was subdivided into 5 books. There are 150 Psalms in the Bible, but it was not evenly distributed of 30, 60, 90, 120, 150. They, to my eye, appear to be fairly randomly divided. It's like 47, 62, 83 hike, and then so on. But there are 5 books of Psalms in the Tanakh. And there are also 5 Megillas, 5 scrolls. And there are some indications, we can't really guarantee, but there are some indications that the 5 books of Psalms were read in some kind of a consistent pattern, just as the 5 books of Torah are read in a very consistent pattern. And we know that the 5 scrolls are read in a very particular manner or pattern. This is the holiday of Shavuos. And Shavuos occurs during the late spring, early summer. So one feature of Shavuos is that we know it's hot. The second is that the early summer harvest is coming in, typically barley, which is a very easy grain, I'm told, to raise in the Middle East. And barley means that you're going to survive. You're going to make it through the hot summer. You'll have plenty to eat, and you make it to Sukkot, which is when, number one, we got through the hot summer, and the fall harvest is coming in, we will be sustained dramatically. So we're talking about heat, and we're talking about food. We're talking about surviving. And that's a major theme within the scroll of Ruth. And you and I know that when it gets very hot, you and I feel challenged. Can we make it? So now we'll do a little bit of a quick abbreviated reading, then we'll get to Yizkor in just a few minutes. But I do want to point out a few features. I'll be summarizing as we read because I want to make this a timely reading, but a little bit of discussion as well. So this happens approximately 3,100 to 200 years ago. Ruth is considered a few generations before King David. King David lives about 3,000 years ago. The people of Israel had left Egypt. Moses had brought them to the wilderness, brought them to the edge of the promised land. Joshua had taken over, brought them in, and they had settled, and they had begun to settle each tribe in its own geographic region throughout the land of Israel. And this is happening in that amorphous time. There's very little collaboration between individual tribes. Each tribe is going its own way. A very good parallel is thinking in our time period, in our own revolutionary era, how the colonies did or did not get along with each other and were not really interested in the affairs of the other. That's the case here. So we're talking about tribal identities. We're talking about subsistence and survival. And just a quick summary, and then I'll keep announcing some pages if you don't mind. So at one point, there are people who are leading the community of Israel, and they're called judges. In the days of the judges, there was a man, and he lived in Bethlehem, which is a city in the region of Judah. This is on page 418. And he's married. His name is Elimelech. He's married to a woman named Naomi, and he's got 2 adult sons. And they move, because there's a famine, they move to Moab, which is Jordan. And his 2 sons Machlon and Chilion, you do not need to remember those names, marry Moabite or Jordanian women, and they live there for some time. And what's striking to me is that there's no surprise or upset mentioned here that these two Jewish adult men wed or marry foreign women. It's stated matter-of-factly, which I think is really interesting. The husband dies, and the two young husbands die. So Naomi, who is now married, is a widow, and she's lost her two adult sons. She's left with two adult daughters-in-law. Third paragraph. She started out with her daughters-in-law to return from the country of Moab. For the country of Moab, she had heard that God had taken note of the people, and now the famine in Judah had broken, and it was safe for her to return home. So she's returning home. She's taking her two daughters-in-law with her. Fourth paragraph, Naomi said to her two daughters-in-law, turn back each of you to her mother's house. May God grant that each of you will find security in the house of a husband. And she kissed them farewell. They broke into weeping, and they said to her, no, we will return with you to your people. And Naomi replied, turn back, my daughters. Why should you go with me? Have I any more sons in my body who might be husbands for you? Turn back, my daughters. I am too old to be married. Even if I thought there was hope for me, even if I were married tonight and also bore sons, would you wait for them to grow up? So what she's really saying is, what's the point of leaving your country, your culture, where you are part of the society and you know the traditions and you know the people, and coming back to Judah? You're not Jewish. You don't potentially know the language. You're not really going to feel at home. Stay here. They broke into weeping again. Orpah kissed her mother-in-law farewell. Ruth clung to her and returned to her people and her gods. Go follow her sister-in-law. And Ruth replied, and this is a very famous phrase, do not urge me to leave you, to turn back. Do not urge me to not follow you. Wherever you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God shall be my God. And this is a profound statement. What is this conveying from Ruth, a Moabite, to her former mother-in-law, a Jewish woman? What is this conveying?
Love is very strong.
Deep love for her mother-in-law or former mother-in-law, depends on how you want to play the game. There's a tremendous devotion, a tremendous respect. Where you live, I will live. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people. Willingness to affiliate and to say, I belong to you, you belong to me, we belong to each other. And furthermore, your God shall be my God. This is a major reason why this Megillah is read on Shavuot. Because on Shavuot, as we are symbolically standing at Mount Sinai, the community of Israel is, you might say, adopting God as a whole. And Ruth is adopting God as an individual. So that's a tie-in to the holiday of Shavuot. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. And we'll stop there. Naomi saw that she was determined. She said, okay, we're walking together. And so they travel. And now on page 419, they arrived in Bethlehem, and the whole city buzzed with excitement over them. And the women said, can this be Naomi? Don't call me Naomi, she replied. Call me Mara. Naomi is a Hebrew word. It means pleasant or pleasing. Hine matova manayim. Naim and Naomi, same word. So all her life, she's had a life that's been good and pleasing and pleasant. She says, my husband is dead. My sons are dead. Don't call me pleasant. I'm changing my name to Mara, which is related to the word maror. What does maror mean? Bitterness, exactly right. So we know how significant names are in the Bible. It doesn't mean that she actually went to the probate court filled out a name change document, obviously. We're talking about the symbolism. So the whole community is saying, hey, let's get together again. It's good to see you. And she says, I'm in a very different part of my life right now. Chapter 2. Naomi had a cousin on her husband's side, a man of substance of the family of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, I would like to go to the fields and glean among the ears of grain behind someone who may show me kindness. Yes, daughter, go, she replied, and off she went. She came and gleaned in a field behind the reapers. This reflects what we already know from Torah law in Exodus, in a little bit of Numbers, and in Deuteronomy, that when a person was poor, the fabric of society was that any person could come to any field being harvested and work behind the employees or behind the family if it was a family farm. And the family members or the employees would go through the fields and harvest all the crops and produce, but any poor person was welcome and eligible to stand a little bit behind. And any food that was missed or accidentally dropped by the farmers or the family members was fair game. And poor people would pick this up and they would literally walk behind the harvesters, row after row, furrow after furrow, and they would take some measure of food home. And that's what you and I, 3,000 years ago, would have called tzedakah. They had different terms for it. Ruth knows about this method of sustaining herself and her mother-in-law, so she goes off to the fields. Presently, Boaz arrived from Bethlehem. He greeted the reapers. May God be with you. And they responded, may Adonai bless you. We have to stop there. Look at this phrase again. It's the fourth paragraph down. It's second paragraph, chapter 2. Boaz arrives from Bethlehem. He greeted the reapers. Adonai imachem. And they responded, Yevarechecha Adonai. That's a very important phrase. Dr. Michael Cohen, why am I pointing that out? Because when Sephardic Jews come up for an aliyah, just as they are about to say the blessings over the Torah, they say, Adonai imachem, and the whole congregation says, Yevarechecha Adonai. That should sound familiar because you do that when you have an aliyah. That practice, that phrasing of may God be close to you, may God be close to you, originates here in the Megillah, and for some reason was adopted by Sephardic Jews. I think it's very pretty. It's saying, we're all aware that God is close to us. May God bless you, may God bless you. It's really pretty. Okay, so now we're moving on. We're in the Ruth Megillah. Boaz notices these workers, and he notices this girl. And he says, whose girl is that? And they say, she's a Moabite girl. And she came back with Naomi from Jordan, from Moab, and she's reaping because, things are a little tight right now. Halfway down, Boaz said to Ruth, listen to me, daughter, don't go to glean in any other field. Don't go elsewhere. Stay here close to my girls, which tells us that there is a professional caste of female harvesters. Boaz has women harvesters on his payroll. I think it's fascinating. And this is hard work. This is backbreaking work. And when you need hard work done, what do? You call a woman. That's it. So he says to Ruth, stay here. Don't go to any other field and harvest behind my professional workers. She says, thank you. And okay, fine. On to the next page, page 420. Yes, we need to get going. At page 420, the top of page 420, at mealtime, Boaz said to her, come over here and eat the meal. Dip your food, your bread into vinegar. Dip your food into a little liquid. Does that sound familiar? From when does it sound familiar? In later Jewish tradition. What do we do in Passover? We dip our foods twice. So this tells us, because this is 3,100 to 3,200 years ago. So this is before what you and I call some of the features of the Seder are actually coming into final form. This tells us that one of their routines was dipping food into vinegar or some kind of, we use dressings in various foods and so on and sauces. So that was a routine. And then much later, in the formalized setting of the Seder, it came to be, as we know, with the parsley dipped into the salt water or the maror dipped into the charoset. Okay, that's just a little bit of trivia. Now you know where it came from. Second paragraph, she gleaned in the field until evening, then she beat out what she'd gleaned. It was about an ephah of barley and carried it back with her. So she's working all day long. She ends up getting about a quart of ground barley. So you work all day in the heat and you get this much, a couple of cups. You go home and you bake a loaf of bread. All that hard work in the heat for one meal that she's sharing with her mother-in-law. This is a woman who is incredibly determined and industrious and energetic and strong-willed and strong of the body, I would imagine, and physically focused so that she can provide for her mother-in-law or ex-mother-in-law. I find incredible loyalty in this woman, Ruth. I don't think you have to support with backbreaking labor your former ex-mother-in-law. She loves Naomi. Chapter 3. This is the adult version. I don't teach this to the middle school kids. This is the adult version. You got to be an adult to understand this part. Here we go. So, chapter 3. So, ongoing work by Ruth in the fields of Boaz over time. Chapter 3. Naomi said to her daughter, I must seek a home for you where you may be happy. Here's our kinsman Boaz, whose girls you were close to. He will be winnowing barley on the threshing floor tonight. Winnowing barley is very hard work, and typically you would do it at nighttime when it's cooler. It's hard work. You're throwing barley down, you're taking certain sticks and you're crushing it, you're beating it, then you throw it up in the air, and the chaff blows away. And the heavy barley falls, and then you collect it and you sweep it. So, and you do this over and over again as long as you have energy. But that's how you collect your harvest, which you're then going to mill and sell. That's how you make your income. So he's working on his AGI right now, and evidently, in the next little bit, he's going to be happy. So Naomi suggests to Ruth, go dress yourself, anoint yourself, and go and meet him late at night. Halfway down that near bottom paragraph, she replied, I'll do everything you tell me. She went down to the threshing floor and did just as her mother-in-law had instructed her. Boaz ate and drank, and a cheerful movement to lie down beside the grain pile, because he's done a lot of work and he sees the result of his productivity. He has this grain that he's going to be wealthy. He's going to be doing okay. She went over stealthily and uncovered his feet and lay down. In the middle of the night, and the man gave a start and pulled back. There's a woman lying at his feet. Who are you? He asks. It's also nighttime. I'm Ruth. Spread your robe over your handmaid. You are a redeeming kinsman. We'll talk about that in a minute. He exclaimed, literally, Brucha at Ladonai. Blessed are you, God. Blessed are you, O young woman of God. Your latest deed of loyalty is greater than the first, which means that this act of coming close to me is an act of, he calls it loyalty, chesed, kindness. You've definitely been showing an act of chesed, of loyalty and kindness to your mother-in-law. You could have selected any other person, a younger man. You've selected me to be intimate with. This is, in a way, she's proposing marriage, in a way, symbolically. That's what's going on here. And she could have picked a young guy. She picks him. He's older. Now, daughter, have no fear. I will do on your behalf whatever you ask. All the elders of my tent know what a fine woman you are. It's true that I am a redeeming kinsman. There's another redeemer closer than I. Stay for the night, and then in the morning, if you act as a redeemer, good, let him redeem. If not, I will be a redeemer. And so they have an evening together. Okay, what happens in Bethlehem stays in Bethlehem on the threshing floor. And then he gets up, and that's chapter 4. Redeeming kinsman is as follows. We've talked about this many times. It's in the book of Devarim and Deuteronomy. If there is a man and he is married and he dies and has no children, then his brother is supposed to marry the widow and have a child. Namely, the brother marries the sister-in-law of the deceased man and has a child in the name of the man who died. That's mentioned in Deuteronomy. It's also mentioned in Genesis. Here in Ruth, we learn that that law pertains to cousins as well, not only brothers. But the element that's going on here is as follows. The man who died at the very beginning of the Megillah, which is Naomi's husband, is Elimelech. Elimelech has had some property still left back home here in Bethlehem. He died, but he's got no heirs. His 2 sons died, and they were childless. He has no heirs. So there's this land, this property that is left floating in space, and it has to go to somebody. And from the Torahitic principle, the land needs to go to descendants of Elimelech. What's going to happen? You can't have land left unbelonging to somebody, because from a religious or theological perspective, every Israelite individual and family and clan has to have its own ownership of land in Israel to farm, to live upon, and have a connection to God and the history of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. So what do you do with this land that's not belonging to somebody? That's a violation of connections to God and humanity. So Boaz knows that he's a distant cousin of the man who died, Elimelech. But Boaz knows there's another cousin as well who's closer in lineage to Elimelech. So here we are in chapter number 4. Boaz had gone to the gate and sat down there. And now the Redeemer whom Boaz had mentioned passed by, and he called out, "Come on over here, Mr. So-and-so." And the words used are Ploni Almoni, which means so-and-so. It's like Joe Schmo or John Q. Public. It's not really names. They're just like, "Hey, you." Really, that's Hebrew. So this is Bible. "Hey, you, come on over." Boaz took 10 elders of the town and said, "Come here, be seated here." What does it sound like to have 10 elders of the town coming to one place? It's a minyan, but they're not going to do the prayers. What do you think they're going to be doing? Making some kind of a decision. There's almost an element of a council or a judicial proceeding taking place here. Boaz took the 10 elders of the town and said, "Be seated here." And they all sat down. He said to the Redeemer, the man whose name we don't know, who's kind of a close cousin to Elimelech, who died, and therefore a close semi-cousin to Naomi. Naomi returned from the country of Moab, and she must sell the pieces of land which belong to our kinsman Elimelech, or make sure that they're still properly cared for. I thought I should disclose the matter to you and say, acquire it in the presence of those seated here, in the presence of the elders of my people. If you're willing to buy the land and take hold of the land, redeem it. If you will not redeem it, tell me, and then I'll redeem it. So it's up to you first, Mr. So-and-so. If not, I'll take over the obligation of maintaining the land. For there's no one but to redeem it but you, and I come after you. Quote mark. I'm willing to redeem it, he replied. We don't know his name. Boaz continued, when you acquire the property from Naomi and from Ruth the Moabite, you must also acquire the wife of the deceased. You've got to marry Naomi or Ruth. And the man says, retirement, I don't want to redeem. Nope, I don't want to do that, because if I were to marry Ruth or Naomi and have a child, that would associate my personal estate with somebody else's lineage. And that means that any of my own kids would have a decreased asset or estate going on into the future. And I don't want to do that. I don't want to impede my estate and my legacy within my own immediate. I might be married, I might have kids, we don't know. So from his point of view, this is an economic issue. He doesn't want to impede his assets from going to his own actual kids, which makes sense. So we're talking about, as we say in Hebrew, ma'asi, we're talking about very grassroots basic stuff here. And then if you look at the very last little paragraph on page 421, and this goes back to the phrasing that we have in the Torah in the book of Deuteronomy. This was formerly done in Israel in cases of redemption or exchange. To validate any transaction, one man would take off his sandal and hand it to the other. We know that because it's mentioned in the Torah. And so when the dreamer said to Boaz, take hold of the property, but also the responsibility of marrying somebody and having a child, which is going to assign the property of Elimelech to that child, not really to you, he drew off his sandal. So the exciting part here is that the book of Ruth, which is non-Toraitic, corroborates what we see in the book of Deuteronomy. Isn't that exciting? Yes. What I see here is we have the opportunity of learning within there. Remember, there are 39 books in the Bible, and each one has a different focus or theme or series of tones or motifs or content. And so for me, it's exciting when differing books of the Bible in one way or another touch on themes and content held in other books. Here we are, page 422. We're almost there. Boaz said to the elders and to the rest of the people, witnesses say that I'm acquiring me all that belonged to Elimelech, to the two young men who died, Chilion and Machlon. I'm also acquiring Ruth the Moabite, the wife of Machlon, as my wife, so as to perpetuate the name of the deceased upon his estate. So Boaz says, I'm paying the bills, and I'm going to have a child, hopefully, and this is going to be a grandson of Elimelech, and part of my property is going to be assigned to Elimelech, who died, and to Ruth's first husband, Machlon, and I'm willing to write that portion of my estate and assets out of my own personal lineage, even if I have other children from a former wife. So he's fulfilling the law found in Deuteronomy, and he's also declaring his love for Ruth and his respect for Naomi. This is a really big deal. Why didn't he marry Naomi? I'm not sure. I imagine because he fell in love with Ruth. That's a good question. Maybe he should have, theoretically, she's the elder. She's the elder.
First,
She should have been married again. Yes, yes. No, actually, no. Let's back up. Because remember, part of this is having a son. And so when Naomi married Elimelech, he had two sons through Naomi. So Elimelech and Naomi accomplished what the law of Deuteronomy is talking about, to have sons, to have heirs. But since those two boys, Machlon and Chilion, those are hard names, Machlon and Chilion died childless in Moab, in Jordan, when they had been living there for 10 years. They were the ones who didn't have an heir, and an heir needed to be made for them. That's what's going on here.
So are we still in a period where, men can have multiple wives?
Are we in a period when men can have multiple wives? Yes. As long as wife number one says it's okay. Now, officially, about 1,000 years ago, there's a rabbi who lived in France. His name is Gershom, and he issued a decree that in his time period, Jewish men in France could not have more than one wife because current practice called for one spouse to one spouse. And when he issued that decree, what he said was that any Jew who marries a second wife will be excommunicated. And 1,000 years ago in France, the threat of excommunication was extreme, and Jewish people did not want to be socially isolated, and so they began to follow the ban of Rabbi Gershom. Other communities in Europe began to follow his ban voluntarily because it made sense, because already in the year 1000 or so, there was gaining a much greater awareness of the practice of one husband married to one wife. And so that followed, and pretty much most of global Jewry adopted that practice.
So that was 1,000.
Right.
3,000.
3,000 years ago,
Theoretically. Both Naomi and Ruth could have been married. Same husband.
yes, theoretically, yes, exactly right. In the days of the Bible, it was certainly legitimate to have multiple wives, as long as having secondary and tertiary wives did not limit the amount of sustenance for every wife. Every wife had to be properly financially sustained. So if you had multiple wives and that cut into how much money you had as a husband, and therefore wife number one, has lovely meals and very lovely clothing, but wife number two has deficient clothing and deficient and inadequate food, then that would not be acceptable. You had to be able to provide well for as many wives as you chose to marry. So domino effect. The more wives, you're going to bring your bottom line is decreasing. So what's your household budget?
First,
So the jump here, because it's time for Yisker. But the jump here is it's in the middle of the second paragraph. And the women, Ruth gets pregnant. So Boaz married Ruth. She became his wife. From you today, may his name be perpetuated in Israel. He will renew your life and sustain your old age. For he is born of your daughter-in-law who loves you. And so it's a happy ever after ending. Naomi took the child and held it to her bosom. She became its foster mother. So Ruth and Boaz get married. They have a child. Naomi is therefore, the grandchild of the baby. And I love this part. And the women neighbors gave him a name, saying, "A son born to Naomi." Who named the baby? The neighbors, the coffee klatch. These are the people who, when she first came back a little while ago, said, "Is this the woman Naomi? She's back from Moab. What's going on?" She said, "No, don't call me Naomi, call me Mara, because I'm a bitter woman right now." The coffee klatch becomes very important within this context. It's the first element of society that welcomes Naomi and Ruth back to Bethlehem. Secondarily, there's interaction between the coffee klatch and Naomi and Ruth along the way. And then once the marriage is formalized between Boaz and Ruth, the coffee klatch is instrumental in offering a special blessing over the couple. And the coffee klatch names the child. The sisterhood is involved. This is really a fascinating window into relationships. And that's striking to me on the holiday of Shavuot. because in a minute we'll be making Yizkor, and I want to make a comment in just a moment. But first, to finish this off, the women neighbors gave him a name, saying, a son is born to Naomi. They named him Oved, and Oved is the father of Jesse, the father of David. So Ruth is the great-grandmother of King David. Ruth is a non-Jewish woman. Now, if you've been reading the Megillah, you can see that there's no, what we would call, official conversion ceremony of this woman. And I would argue that 3,000 years ago, there was not what you and I call now a conversion ceremony. Today there is. We have protocols and methods and so on. Back then, when you joined the tribe and you lived in accordance with the tribe and you lived in the community, you were considered a Jew. And so she marries, she's raising a child, she's taking care of her elderly mother-in-law, who is a Jew. Ruth is just welcomed into the community and she's integrated into the community and she becomes a Jew. So we have this association with the community, with the institutions, with the legal practices. And now you understand why this Megillah is associated with Shavuot. Because Shavuot is talking about becoming part of a community, adopting traditions, connecting to God, and supporting the members of your people, all of which Ruth does. What I love about Ruth is that we have a text of a woman whom we would not expect to be a dramatic influencer and innovator. She's a Moabite from a desert community during a famine, and she ends up being responsible for supporting her family and bringing King David into our history because of love and loyalty and hard work. I love this Megillah. I get excited every year. God plans ahead.
That's fun.
God plans. That's why Boaz. Thank you, Mark. God plans ahead. That's why Boaz married Ruth and not Naomi. Thank you. So now we'll turn to Yizkor. And Yizkor is on page 330. It is the memorial service. It has been a tradition for over 1,000 years to have a brief memorial service on Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot. Probably because on the holidays, many memories come to whom we are. We've had family gatherings for all of our years, hopefully over the holidays, over the Yom Tovim. And on family gatherings, we notice who's not here. It's ever more striking. So thus we have Yizkor. And you're invited to rise now on page 330. Adonai ma'adam b'teroehu ben adam ben enosh b'dagashpehu adam lahevel dama yamav k'tzel over baboker yitzitz v'chalaf la'erev yamalavi yavesh limnot yameinu kenoda v'navi levav chochma. Adonai, what are human beings that you take account of them, mortals that you care for them? Humans are as a breath. Their days like a passing shadow. In the morning, they flourish anew. In the evening, they shrivel and die. Teach us to count each day that we may acquire a heart of wisdom. Some of us recall parents who gave us life, who cared for us and nurtured us, and who taught us to take our first steps on our own. Some of us remember a wife, husband, or partner, our friend and lover, with whom we shared so much of our lives, our failures and achievements, joys and sorrows, intimate secrets. Some of us recall brothers and sisters who matured together with us, sometimes competing with us, and sometimes encouraging us. bound to us by a lifelong relationship. Our lives are shaped by those who were alongside us as we walked on our path. May our inheritance impel us to strive to lives of holiness and service. May memories of love inspire us to love. May painful memories impel us to mitigate the pain others experience. And may we be granted the strength to affirm life's meaning, even in the face of death. On page 331. Shiviti Adonai L'negdi Tamid, Ki mimini ba'al emot, L'chein samach libi v'agol kvodi, Apis rishon levetach. Adonai is always before me, at my right hand, lest I fall. Therefore I am glad, made happy, though I know that my flesh will lie in the ground forever. Eternal God, Master of mercy, give me the gift of remembering. May my memories of the dead be tender and true, undiminished by time. Let me recall them and love them as they were. Shelter me with the gift of tears. Let me express my sense of loss, my sorrow, my pain, as well as my love and words unspoken. Bless me with the gift of prayer. May I face you with an open heart, with trusting faith, unembarrassed and unashamed. Strengthen me with the gift of hope. May I always believe in the beauty of life, the power of goodness, the right to joy. May I surrender my being of the dead to your all-knowing compassion. And on page 335 and 335 on the second side as well, an opportunity to pause and remember some of our loved ones in our own private thoughts and reflections. on page 337, the 23rd Psalm in a more contemporary English translation on page 337. Adonai is my shepherd, I shall not want. God lays me down in green pastures, leads me to still waters, renews my life, guides me in right paths, for that is God's way. Let's stop there. What has God done so far in these first two stanzas? God takes me to green pastures and God leads me to still waters, takes me to where I need to be, and renews my life and guides me in my paths. Next lines. Though I walk through a valley as dark as death, I fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me, which means God is taking me on a walk and loaning me God's own walking staffs. Will you and I fall if you are walking using God's walking staff? Will we stumble? God's staff, you're going to stand up. You spread a table before me in full view of my foes. You anoint my head with oil. My cup is overflowing. Who was anointed in the ancient days? Kings, priests, and prophets, which means every one of us is like a king or a queen or a priest or a prophet. My cup is overflowing. Only goodness and steadfast love shall pursue me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of Adonai forever. Wherever I look, I feel that I'm surrounded by the presence of goodness and kindness and love. Contrast on page 338. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabba. Amen. Be'alma divra kirutei v'yamlich malchutei b'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chaye dechol beit Yisrael ba'agala uv'zaman kariv v'imiru. Amen. Yehi shmei Rabba mevarach la'olam olmei olmayak. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal shemei dekudesha b'richu la'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran ba'alma v'imru. Amen. Yehi Shalama Rabba Min Shemaya V'chaim Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael V'imeru. Amen. Oseh Shalom Bimromav Hu Ya'aseh Shalom Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael V'imeru. Amen. In a moment, we'll conclude the service with the Aleinu, but just a word to consider in terms of the Kaddish. People call this the mourner's Kaddish, and whether it's recited in any context of what we call the regular prayer service schedule or Yizkor, it's the same wording. And built into this is a yearning for hope and peace. There's no indication of loss or sorrow or hurt, but there's a fervent energy for hope and shalom. And we Jews have been reciting this prayer in one way or another for about 1700, 1800 years. And that's how our prayer system communicates to us the value that it has for us, that we can see ourselves as being part of a community, and the community is structured for hope and peace, for hearing multiple voices, for being together. That's what Kaddish is all about. We turn now to the Aleinu, and it's on page 205. Page 205. Excuse me. Aleinu l'shabeach ladon hakol, latet gedula leotzer breshit, shelo asanuk goyei haratzot, velo samanu k'mishpachot adamot, shelo sam chelkenu kahem, v'gor aleinu kechol hamonam. V'anachnu korim u'mishtachavim u'modim lifnei melech malchei hamlochim hakadosh baruch hu she'unot hashamayim v'yosein haaretz u'moshav yikaro b'shamayim mimal u'shchinatu zo Begave meromim, hu Eloheinu Einod, emet malkeinu efes zulato, takatu betoroto, yadata yom vashevota el bavecha, ki Adonai hu Elohim. Mimal vial haaretz mitachot ein ud. Takatu b'toratecha, Adonai yimloch l'olam voed, v'nemar, v'haya Adonai, l'melech al kol haaretz, bayom hahu, yiyeh Adonai echad, u'shemo, Ushema echad. We may be seated. And we'll conclude with Oseh Shalom, because we desperately need shalom here in our world, in our lives. And when it originated, it wasn't just at the mourner's Kaddish, it was at the full Kaddish and other places as well. So that's why we go out into the world on this day. We conclude Shavuot, and we look at the world before us. And each one of us can bring shalom into the world. Oseh Ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Hey Ya'aseh shalom shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Ya'aseh shalom shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. And to those who joined in from the cybersphere, may God bless you and watch over you. May you be healthy and safe. May you have peace. Shalom from Havas Chesed. Happy Shavuos. Lo Dvar Nachama.